I am Ethan Harper, residing in New York City, a place where the lights remain aglow and the rhythm of life is unrelenting. To an outsider, my life may appear perfect: a secure job, a joyful family, and a lovely wife whom I have cherished for 15 years. However, I could never have anticipated confronting a harsh reality. As the late afternoon sunlight filtered through the window, I found myself in the kitchen, nursing a cold cup of coffee while gazing out at the shimmering streetlights. Yet, within me, a profound sense of despair was taking root. Recently, I have sensed a growing distance between Sarah and myself. She has been returning home later, our date nights have dwindled, and our conversations have become increasingly brief, as if an invisible chasm is developing between us. I am not one to express my feelings openly, often retreating into my work, but I could no longer overlook the shifts in our relationship. In the evenings, I would wait for Sarah's return, only to feel her brush past me without a word. Me, as if I were an unnoticed part of the backdrop. I didn't blame her. I understood that work could be exhausting, but this time something felt wrong, something that I couldn't quite explain. And then the truth came to me, simple yet brutal. Sarah came home. She stepped in, said nothing, and started undressing, treating me like I was invisible. I sat there silently, and the feeling of unease grew stronger inside me. Today was one of those days where I decided not to overlook it any longer. That feeling, I couldn't explain. The vague emptiness in my heart became clearer. Finally, I couldn't stay silent anymore. I gently set my coffee cup down on the table, my heart heavy like a stone. "Sarah," I called, my voice calm but firm. She paused, turned to look at me, not surprised in the slightest. "What's going on?" she asked, her gaze neutral, as if we had never had a relationship close enough to worry about each other. I tried to keep my tone light, not letting my emotions take over, but this was the question I had been avoiding for so long. "I know you're cheating on me," I said, not angrily, but with a painful realization, "and I suspect this has been going on for a long time." I saw Sarah's eyes widen slightly, a forced smile flickering across her face, but it wasn't a smile of relief. It was the smile of someone who fears being caught. "You're starting this again." She sighed, her voice light, trying to deny what I had just said. "Ethan, you know how busy my work is. What's going on with you? Can't you accept that sometimes I have necessary meetings?" I shook my head but didn't say anything. Sarah never understood how I felt. "You say I can't accept it, but that's not the issue," I said. My voice steady, though. My eyes betrayed my disappointment. "You come home late, then have vague work trips." "I'm not an idiot, Sarah. I know you're lying to me." She stood there, silent, not responding, not angry. She just looked at me, her gaze tired, as though she had heard enough of my accusations. "Why can't you understand? I have needs, Ethan, for years. You haven't been able to satisfy me physically, and I need something else, so you're saying I'm not good enough as your husband." I clenched my jaw, trying not to let my emotions get the best of me. "Am I just some emotionless machine unable to fulfill you?" She peed her lips but didn't answer right away. Instead, a sharp reply came from her mouth. "I'm not saying that, but you don't understand my needs. We haven't been the same for a long time." Her words cut through me like a knife, but instead of becoming angry, I felt hollow. The things she said, the justifications, couldn't stop me from feeling the betrayal. I stood up, walking closer to her. "I don't care what you do," I said. My voice lowered, "but the one thing I can't accept is the lies and being treated like a worthless object." She didn't say anything, but her gaze had shifted no longer. Was there arrogance or calmness? There was only hesitation, fear, as if she realized there was nothing left to salvage. After a long silence, she spoke, her voice weak. "Can't you forgive me?" I looked at her, my heart aching, but no, I couldn't. She had done too much for me to turn back. "No, Sarah, you can't keep hurting me and expect me to forgive you. You chose this path, and now I will choose mine." Sarah stood motionless in the living room, her eyes filled with fear. What I had just said wasn't just a confrontation with the truth. It was an ending she couldn't avoid. I was no longer the quiet, enduring man, the one who could easily forgive her. but I couldn't deny what I had felt, what I had endured for months. She started to move, stepping closer to me but not daring to look me in the eye. I looked at her, my anger still there. But now I didn't feel the same desperation as before. I knew she was justifying herself, but I didn't want to hear her excuses anymore. Gentle words, unconditional forgiveness. All of that was a thing of the past. I'm so tired, I said, my voice sinking. Tired of standing on the outside watching you live your life while I can't even be a part of my own life. Sarah didn't respond. She just stood there, her eyes filled with tears. I could see the regret in her eyes. But was it too late to change everything? I decided not to give her any more time to justify herself. Do you know how I feel? I asked, stepping closer, not taking my eyes off her. Do you think I don't feel anything when I see you go out with other men, when I have to suffer alone? I'm the one you call husband. Yet I'm not even treated with any respect. Sarah swallowed hard and she turned away for a long moment, as if searching for some words to fix the situation. But there was nothing left. Everything had become too clear. That feels terrible, doesn't it? I continued, my voice filled with bitterness. I've endured, I've been patient, but what about you? You don't respect me at all. You treat me like I'm useless in your life. Sarah turned back to me, her eyes now filled with tears she couldn't hold back. I don't know what to say anymore, she stammered, her voice trembling. I was wrong, but I need you. I don't know what I've done. Ethan, I just can't explain it. I looked at her, unable to forgive her so easily. You say you need me, but I don't see that. You truly need me. You need other things, other satisfactions outside. You need things that I can't provide anymore, and that's why you turn to them. Sarah stepped back as though my words hit her each time she tried to speak. You can't understand. I don't love them, she said, her eyes shimmering with despair. It's just that I couldn't stand the loneliness anymore. You weren't there, Ethan. You're not the man I can share everything with anymore. You just changed. I moved closer to her, my eyes cold. But deep down, filled with overwhelming disappointment, I changed. I repeated, my voice slightly choked. Don't you see, you changed before me. You changed the moment you stopped seeing me as your partner and only saw me as a useless companion. Sarah lowered her head, unable to say anything more. She knew she was wrong, but how could anything be salvaged? Now could an apology undo the wounds I had suffered? I know you loved me for a long time, I said, a pang in my chest. But you didn't love me enough to stop lying. You didn't love me enough to look at me without indifference. You didn't love me enough to respect me as a man. She broke down crying, unable to keep up the strong front she had put on. I'm sorry, Ethan. I didn't want to hurt you. I don't know why I did it. A heavy silence passed between us. I looked at Sarah, seeing her weakness and helplessness, but not a shred of pity. I had gone through the pain to stand here. But perhaps I couldn't give her another chance. It's not about saying sorry now, I said, my voice firmer than ever. What matters is what you've done to Ara, and I won't let you continue lying to me. She stepped closer, her eyes pleading with me once again, but I no longer wanted to see that weakness. I couldn't continue living in a marriage where respect had been trampled like that. I can't live with you anymore, Sarah, I said, my voice dry. We can't salvage anything anymore. I've made my decision. Sarah collapsed onto the couch, tears streaming down endlessly. She didn't say anything no more. Justifications, all she did was cry, but I couldn't forgive this betrayal. All the apologies were too late when Sarah left. I didn't feel an emptiness. It was as if everything had ended a long time ago, and now I could start again. I decided to step into a new life. I wouldn't let the hurt overwhelm me. Instead, I would find the joys I had lost over the years. I began participating in activities I enjoyed, things I had put aside because of her. Each passing day, I felt stronger, no longer living. Under the shadow of betrayal, Sarah was no longer an important part of my life. Life could go on, and I would keep living alone. But as a stronger man, no longer burdened by wounds that couldn't heal, when Sarah left, the space in the house became eerily quiet. Every little corner we had shared was now empty and cold. But I didn't feel a void, not like before. The feeling I had now wasn't sadness, but serenity. A part of me felt relieved that I had finally escaped her shadow. But the other part, the one I didn't want to admit, still harbored anger, a resentment I could no longer bear when thinking about the betrayal I had endured. I'm not the kind of person who seeks revenge. I've always been quiet, patient, and enduring. But this time I knew I couldn't just sit back and let everything pass by. I had to do something, not to hurt her, but to make her understand the gravity of her actions starting that day. I spent time planning. The plan wasn't to destroy her, but to make her realize that her actions weren't just a simple mistake, but a brokenness that couldn't be mended. I started gathering evidence that I had previously found: messages, phone calls, meetings, all of it carefully stored. A part of me wanted her to face everything, and the other part, the part I couldn't hide, wanted Sarah to feel what I had gone through during this time. The next day I began quietly following every trace, every action, every gesture Sarah made. She continued her life, going out with those men. But I knew everything I knew about David, about Bob, about the other encounters she had. But instead of getting angry, I felt strangely calm. I was no longer caught up in the pain. I had everything I needed: evidence, patience, and a plan to confront this betrayal. One evening when Sarah went out, I decided to take the first step in my plan. I secretly followed her without her knowing. I knew where she would meet and what she would do. Part of me felt like I was watching a game unfold, but the other part, the painful part, felt a strange sense of anticipation, as though I was waiting for something. I couldn't forget what she had done, but I didn't want to continue living in anger and jealousy. When Sarah came back home late that night, I was ready. That evening when she returned, I didn't let her avoid the situation any longer. I had been sitting there in the dark, waiting silently, when she opened the door and walked in. I stood up facing her, and I could feel the surprise and fear in Sarah's eyes. "Ethan," she said, her voice somewhat nervous, I didn't think you'd come back so early." "Come back early?" I repeated, my voice low but full of coldness. "I know where you've been. I know what you've been doing, and you think—" "I don't know." Sarah stood still, her eyes widening as if she couldn't believe what I had just said. She didn't respond immediately, standing there quietly, trying to find an explanation. But I didn't need to hear an explanation. I already had everything I needed. "David, right?" I asked, my voice calm. "And Bob, or the other men you've been seeing?" She couldn't say anything, just standing there, tears beginning to fall. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice choked. "I don't know what to say anymore. I was wrong, but don't do this. I still love you." "Love?" I asked, sneering. "You love me, and yet you sleep with other men, treating me like a weakling who can't satisfy you." She stepped closer, her eyes pleading for my forgiveness, but I didn't want to hear any more apologies. "You can't deceive me anymore, Sarah," I said, my voice still as cold as ice. "I've endured enough, and now it's time for you to pay the price." She didn't say anything, just standing there, her eyes full of regret. I knew she felt guilty, but I couldn't continue living in the pain of the past. I had made my decision. "I don't need you to explain anymore," I continued, my voice strong. "I know everything, and now I'll show you what I know." I opened my laptop and played a video. Sarah looked at the screen, and I saw her shudder slightly as she realized I had gathered all the evidence of her betrayal. The video showed her dates with David and Bob, the hugs, the kisses, all clear and undeniable. Sarah looked at it, unable to believe that I knew everything. "You thought you could keep deceiving me forever," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "This is the price you must pay, not just for you, but for the men you brought into your life. I don't need to do anything else. It's all clear." She stood still, unable to say a word. Tears continued to fall, but I felt no pity, only coldness, only determination. The room grew heavy, silent, except for Sarah's sobs. She stood there, her hands clenched as if trying to hold on to whatever she had left. But unable to stop the tears from falling, I stood there silent, feeling no sympathy. I had endured for too long to turn back now. This silence was like the final nail in the coffin of my pain. "I can't forgive you," I said, my voice gentle but sharp. "You've crossed every line I could forgive. You've gone too far. I can't just stand here and watch you continue to hurt me." Sarah sobbed, looking up at me with desperate eyes. I was wrong, Ethan. I'm sorry, I know I can't go back, but I regret it. You're the one I love most. But I don't know why I did this. I couldn't hear her apology anymore. She had repeated those words so many times without changing anything. Sorry won't fix anything, Sarah. I said, my voice hoarse, because of what you've done. I won't go back. I can't live in empty words and apologies without action. She took a step back as if a blow had struck her hard, Ethan. She wanted to say something, but no words came out. We just stood there in silence, looking at each other with a distance between us that couldn't be bridged. I knew she regretted it, but regret couldn't replace what had been lost. I felt empty, not because I didn't love her anymore, but because I couldn't continue living in a relationship that had been torn apart too many times. I didn't meet Sarah anymore. I spent the whole day thinking, clearing my mind of all the negative emotions she had left behind. I felt nothing for her anymore except coldness and resolve. All I wanted now was to find myself, to regain the strength I had lost later that evening. Sarah called me. I didn't answer right away, but then decided to pick up. Her voice sounded weak, no longer confident like it had been before. Ethan, I know I was wrong, but I want you to know that I really love you. I don't know what to do to fix everything I've destroyed. I'll do anything to make you forgive me. I stayed silent, not knowing what to say. Honestly, I didn't want to hear those words anymore. I didn't want to go back to her, not to live in empty apologies. I had realized that forgiveness isn't always the path to happiness. I can't forgive you, I replied, my voice still gentle, but firm, not because I don't love you anymore, but because I can't live in that lie anymore. I've made my decision, Sarah. I won't go back. On the other end of the line, Sarah didn't say anything. A long silence enveloped both of us. Finally, she spoke. I understand. I just want you to know that I love you. No matter what happens. I didn't respond this time. I didn't need to say anything else. She had realized there was no way to fix everything. A marriage cannot be saved once it's been broken too. Deeply, I began the first steps to rebuild my life. The first days after Sarah left were days I spent focusing on myself. I walked the streets of New York, stopped by the cafes I used to frequent with Sarah. I felt everything gradually becoming lighter. I no longer had to live in the shadow of betrayal. I no longer had to pretend that everything was fine, when it was clear that it no longer was. I returned to the work I had neglected before, the projects I had lost interest in. Now I poured all my energy into. I began reconnecting with